say that they don't know or they can't see the screen. Can you all see the screen now? You can use your mics because I can't go back to Teams to see.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, let's begin. So today we'll be focusing on the unit, being Unit 5, under the principles and processes of successful conflict resolution and management. But before we get into this, I can share a story with you just a little bit. Now, for me that have been granted an opportunity to work in the public sector, I've seen this happening over and over. And one thing that I've seen is that most of public officials, they have no idea. Okay, let me just say, in terms of conflicts, they know that conflicts are there. In fact, conflicts are always there in a workplace. But the problem is people do not know what are the principles and processes of how to manage a conflict, because I don't know, there's this tendency that when you are working with someone, there's this, I don't know, a certain, I don't know if I can say an attitude or some sort of a behavior whereby you can act anyhow. And if there's a conflict, instead of resolving the conflict, people end up transferring blame or maybe bullying others. I'm sure you have heard of workplace bullying. It's happening. In fact, I've experienced it with one of my colleagues, whereby the certain supervisor was busy shouting at him. In fact, outside the workplace, where everyone could hear what the supervisor was saying to the assistant director. So these are some of the things that are very, very serious, and they're not taken seriously at the workplace. In fact, it's all about who has power. One thing that I've noticed so far is that those in higher positions, they have this tendency of bullying those ones at the lower levels, whereby your supervisor might come to you and just cause some sort of rushing you into doing something, and you find that because of that you end up having some sort of conflict whereby you don't like your boss, you hate your boss. In fact, when you know that tomorrow is Monday, you just have this hard like pressure. I don't know what is it about our African people that when you think about Monday and your boss and the work that you're supposed to do, people just hate the working place. In fact, most of research studies have found that over 70% of people that go to work actually hate their work. Like you're going to this place every single day. You know, there's this conflict that is remains unresolved, and it takes your peace and you can't even perform well. So these are some of the issues that you deal with in the workplace. I mean, for those that maybe have not started working, or for those that are working will know what I'm talking about, whereby even during presentations and meetings, some people have this, uh, you're always afraid or you fear to speak in public. You know, these are some of the things that, um, although they don't cause conflict, but within you, there is a conflict that you haven't really resolved within yourself, because it makes you to feel like you are unable to express your thoughts, your ideas. You always feel like maybe if I was to speak, I would be undermined. Maybe I would, like, sometimes you even convince yourself that it's okay just to be someone that is quiet, someone that doesn't say anything during meetings. And this also happens even during classes, whereby you ask a student to say any questions, people will just keep quiet. And doesn't mean that you are helping yourself. No. One thing that I've noticed is that the more you don't speak during meetings and presentations, it builds up some sort of a habit in you. It becomes part of you that even though you want to ask something serious, you don't know how to ask. Or maybe you end up just saying, it's fine. I'll just find out. And it's going to cost you sometimes because you might miss an opportunity whereby your answers could have been, your questions could have been answered during that meeting if you were bold enough to actually speak up. Because one thing that I must tell you from my experience is that if you have fear of speaking out, or maybe of approaching someone that you have a conflict with, you will never ever be bold enough in your old age. You always regret things that maybe if I spoke that day, my performance could have been better. Maybe if I asked that question, maybe I could have answered that question better. And sometimes don't be afraid to ask what people say or label as stupid questions. No, it's about building your confidence. And one thing that I can also say right now is that even me, when I started my varsity days, I had a conflict with myself to a point that I will fight with myself to say that, you know what, the only way to deal with this is to face it hardcore, face it every day, even if I feel so, I don't know, some sort of fear, or I feel like I'm nervous, or whatever it is that is running in my mind. I just have to say it. You're building up yourself. And one of the reasons why conflict remain unresolved at the workplace is that people are afraid to speak. And I'm talking about bosses, I'm talking about people in higher positions. And when you tell them to speak up, they will say that I don't want to cause a conflict. And that's what it's all about. Cause a conflict while you're busy solving another conflict. Why? Because if you don't speak up, people begin to tolerate what is not acceptable, and they end up doing unlawful things within the workplace. So very, very important. Now, one thing that I can also say about the topic is that don't take lightly that word principles. Here's one thing that I learned when I was researching on the topic, because most of the time I don't want to rely on your study guide alone. So the word principles is really, really associated with terms like laws, standards, things like rules. And why am I saying this? Is because if you just see principles as principles, you won't understand the importance of principles and processes. So the reason I want to focus on this is that I want to help you that even when you read, you understand that every study, every field of study is built on principles. We can talk about LLB, you can talk about public administration, or any kind, or engineering, or whatever it is that people are studying. It is about principles that are being explored within that field. Now, so what makes principles important is that principles are laws that are permanent and do not change. In fact, when people violate principles, instead of breaking principles as they think, or let me just say, people think that they can always violate principles and get away. But let me just teach you something here to say that you don't violate principles and get away. In other words, principles violate you and they cause you harm. For example, in our case, since you're a student, suppose you don't study, because studying in itself is a principle. When you study, what you're saying to your brain is that I want my brain to grasp, to understand, and to be able to help me attempt to tackle some exams or some exam questions. Now you avoid studying, you avoid doing what is it that the student's supposed to do to prepare for a task or for an exam. You avoid that. And then the day that you're supposed to write comes, what do you think is going to happen to you? One thing that is going to happen is that your brain will tell you that, you know what, you did not put anything in my brain. I'm empty. What you're going to do, you're going to try to find ways to cheat. You're going to find ways to just find, and you do not have enough time to do that. So what do? You think, or let me just say, what you see there in that scenario that I'm trying to elaborate on, principles right now are working against you. In other words, you're forcing a principle to become the way you want. In fact, you're supposed to study so that when that day comes, your brain allows or agrees with the principle to say that now I'm able to remember what I learned and what I studied. So this is the same thing. Even in the workplace, the principle of conflict resolution and management is that if leaders or managers do not have processes that they're supposed to deal with conflict and manage that conflict within the workplace, what's going to happen is that people are going to build that organization based on, fear, regret. They won't be free. Have you seen a workplace where I'm sure there have been cases, for example, where people will say that workplace can be very toxic sometimes. There's a phrase like that. People will say that, yes, it's toxic. And it's not because people are toxic. No, it's because people are failing how to address and how to resolve conflict and how to manage them. You know what? And you see this in most cases, it begins from your childhood or from your lifestyle, whereby you take what you know in the workplace and what you do outside work, you also want to do in the workplace. For example, a boss that wants to bully you, you find that this person doesn't just bully people at work, even outside work, they want to bully, they want to get their way every time. They don't want to listen to anything. So this can really, really create that environment that you hate. That is why I've seen people saying that I pray for a healthy workplace. And as much as you can pray for that, it's also important that even within that workplace, you have measures that deals with problems, that deals with conflict. And at the end of the day, you resolve them. And sometimes people end up taking this to disciplinary hearings where someone might end up losing their job instead of just addressing this in your offices, talk about them in your meetings, and find an amicable way to resolve this, which can be that simple if people really, really want to invest time to study how conflicts start, to study how conflict can be resolved and can be managed. I hope I make sense. But yeah, for the sake of time, let's just move to the learning unit outcomes so that you can see what is it that you're supposed to learn by the end of this unit. Now, what I understand here is that by the end of this unit, you should be able to know the techniques and principles of conflict resolution. You should also know the critical part of how to understand the importance of conflict resolution in the public service. Now, why that word understand the importance of conflict resolution is that the failure of organization turning into toxic organization is that even leaders and managers and supervisors and subordinates and everyone that works within that organization lack proper understanding of conflict resolution. And again, although some might understand it, they do not have the wisdom or the way in which it's supposed to be applied. You know, sometimes you can understand something, but lacking the ideas of how you're supposed to implement that and attract people to actually or adhere to what the organization is all about. Now, moreover, you should be able to define key concepts. Although it's about defining, for me, it's about understanding what concept related to processes or maybe principles and processes of successful conflict resolution is all about and how to manage it. And again, you should be able to identify and explain the techniques and principles of conflict resolution. Again, be able to explain and understanding and understanding the importance of conflict resolution in the public service. In fact, if you look at these outcomes, they are quite similar, all of them, because it's all about conflict resolution skills and so forth. So there's a skill into every situation that you find yourself that you must know so that you know what to do. One thing that I can say, or maybe one thing that after this unit you should remember is this, that the greatest thing to do and know within the organization, or when you are an employee in the public service, is that you must know which decisions to make and which decisions to avoid. Why? Why am I saying this? Is because in most cases, some people do not know which decisions they are entrusted to make or not to make. Because you find that some of this conflict actually emanates from cases where a certain employee made a decision without consulting the relevant office. In fact, when you do that, when you're supposed to do that, you actually undermine the authority of the other office to say that, yeah, but they will understand I need to do this. No, it's you're working in a chain whereby even if you can do or make a certain decision, you must consult with the relevant office to say that I was thinking to do this and this so that this can be improved. And then even if you know this is your idea, act as if you're giving them all the credit, but you know that you're the one that came up with the idea, especially if you're working under someone that usually do not embrace ideas or innovative ways of dealing with things. So after that, if they reject and you see that maybe this is the way, maybe that way you can have a way of saying that, you know what, I told my manager and she or he didn't approve, but I saw it fit to do this. But some people don't even suggest anything. They just do the way they feel like they should do, which causes a very, very serious conflict within the workplace. So the first thing is know which decisions to make and which decisions to avoid. Very, very important to understand, because the greatest success of any organization is in most cases knowing which decisions not to make, because a lot of organizations have turned themselves in trying almost everything, and that can cost you a lot of money and time that you do not have. Very, very important to understand. Now, what the purpose of this unit is to provide you with an in-depth understanding of the principles and processes to actually have a successful conflict resolution and management. That is what the unit is all about. In other words, in this unit, we're going to seek how to identify and explain the techniques, the skills, and principles and processes of conflict resolution, the style of conflict resolution, and conflict management. Because at the end of the day, all those techniques and principles and skills and techniques needs to be managed so that you know that people are aware on how to handle conflict and resolve it. Very, very exciting. Do you know one thing that causes relationships to fail is the lack of conflict resolution management? Why am I saying this? If you're in a relationship with your manager, if you guys don't have a good conflict resolution techniques and management, you're not gonna last. Why? Because it's so easy to offend your boss, and it's so easy for your boss to offend you. But in most cases, bosses are more offended more than the employees. This is partly because of the position they hold. Because in most cases, when you hold a lower position, some people feel like maybe it's okay for my boss to be rude to me because he's a boss. You understand? I still don't understand that. So for me, I remember where I was working for almost 6 years. The director there used to have his ways of dealing with employees. But when it came to me, it was always a challenge. In fact, he was the one that had issues with me to a point that he once called me to his office to explain or to express himself about how I treat him. And then I was, okay, this is weird because I thought the director is more educated, he understands how things should be done. In fact, the reason why he called me was because of my professionalism. Because with me, I always wanted to make sure that things were done in order. Why? Because if you just go into a workplace and quickly blend in with the culture that people already have there, you're not going to show yourself as someone that is valuable because everybody else is going to take you that you're just one of them. So when you act different and do things differently, you annoy people that are not professional. That is the case that I can mention to you to understand that being professional also can cause conflict for those that are not professional because professionalism challenges you know the culture that people are used to. That's very, very important to understand because once you get into a place and you realize that these people are not professional at all and you remain as professional as you are, they will think that maybe you think you know better. And that's not your problem, it's their problem because in the workplace, you're supposed to have a very, very professional relationship with managers. For example, I know this is very, very common across all sectors, if I must say. You find that the manager within the workplace is used to dating women within the organization. And suppose the manager is dating someone that has a very, very high position, and this female worker is supposed to make sure that everything that is brought or delivered or incoming to their office supposed to be attended to. And because they also have a relationship or a romantic relationship with their higher boss, they take their jobs lightly, you know, and that's a very, very serious problem because those that are not in the romantic relationship always get affected at the end of the day. It affects them and their performance as well to say that, but when it comes to him, things are always being attended to, but to us, things are being, you know, there's always this red tape when it comes to us. They don't want to help us at all. And that's a problem that we face. And I'm not talking about just few organizations. Most organizations in our African culture operates like that. You find that people are dating or people are having romantic relationship and that affect their performance. And even though you cannot control what people do, but I I would feel like it would be better if the romance was left out of the office and everything in the office is done professional. But because you are one person, you can't switch into two individuals and be this and be that. Only certain people maybe can master that. But that's the problem that we face. Now, with conflict resolution techniques can be applied in many contexts, including adjudications, administrative, civil, judicial, enforcement action, permit issuance. These are some of the field or the sections that conflict resolution can end up into. When we talk about adjudication, this is where now offices or organizations have failed to address certain issues within their small space. Now you have to go to a group of people that have to judge the situation and come up with a verdict to say that this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong, this is right. Can you imagine people that are educated, especially within the academic field or the academic community, whereby you have professors, doctors, you know, people that have PhDs and masters and all these things, they can't deal with a conflict. It must go almost to court just to address. So it's really important for us to understand. And then this is serious business because there's serious litigation that must be processed in the process, whereby simple conflict now have amounted into something that the organization must pay to learn a lesson. This is why in most cases you'll find that because of the arrogance of certain managers, now there must be money or someone must be compensated because the organization did not want to sit down with the person to address a specific conflict that they had. It could be an employee or it could be a former employee. For example, just 2 weeks back, we had a case with this other guy who's supposed to, in fact, the guy was told from one of the offices that I used to work at that because they resigned from the workplace, they had to give them their money, you know, what the department owed them. And then the old man was given his money in 2010, if not 2011. Everything was given to him. Now, he started a conflict, or he started to have a conflict just recently with the department to say that there must be some sort of funds, some sort of grants that he must get from the department because he's an old man, he retired at a specific age. And then he missed a clause from his contract to say that, yes, you can get your grant and all these things from the government department that you used to work at, only if you retired at a specific age, either 55 or 60 or 65 years. Now, his problem was that he resigned, you know, he did not retire. Maybe he misunderstood the two terms, retiring and resigning. When you resign, it's like, yeah, give me what is mine and I want to get out of here. And then that's what they do. They give you money and you're gone. And you don't get the benefits that maybe you suppose or you are entitled to get after someone retires, because they must honor your years of service. But this one decided to just leave. You understand? It's one of those things or one of those cases. So these are some of the things that if you do not deal with them at an early stage, you're going to have serious conflict at the end of the day. But I can go on and on. I'll never finish. But for the sake of time, let's go to the concepts associated with the unit. So I'm just going to use the two concepts. The other ones are from your slides. I mean, slides as well as your study guide. Now, let's understand what conflict resolution is all about. So when something is a process, it means it must be initiated and followed thoroughly. So conflict resolution is a process of managing a conflict and negotiating a solution. Very, very important. I think that definition explains everything that I just said. In other words, if there is a conflict, initiate a process, but not just a process where you are well equipped and resourceful in terms of managing that conflict through negotiations so that you find a solution. I remember reading a book about how to negotiate. It's a very, very small book, but it's very informative. I read this book years ago, but I still remember the concepts within that book. What the guy was talking about is that when you're negotiating for a solution, don't be the first one to speak or to suggest something. Let your opponent suggest what they want, and don't disagree with them at first. Let them speak and have all these ideas and wants and needs being made clear to you. Then after that, make sure that you have understood what they're saying. And I think I like the second part where it says it is best understood as a working model with two key elements: conflict management and negotiation. Very, very important. I think that really, really resonate with what I'm saying. So the key thing there is that be the one that speaks last. Why? Because that gives you the entire room to address them, to say, you know what, I've heard all of you, I've heard the conflict, but here's what I believe is the best. And in most cases, when you're the last one to speak, you draw attention and you can give as much ideas as you have. But don't just use that as something that is nice and gives you attention. No, do that knowing that you are someone that always comes up with solutions that suits the situation and their needs. You know, sometimes when you resolve a conflict, it's not about trying to show who's the boss and who's not the boss. No, it's about showing how a situation can be broken down and be made something that is so simple to understand, and that at the end of the day, people can continue to work together and in harmony or harmonious environment. And you want your employees to work in such an environment because at the end of the day, they must produce something that the company or the organization is all about. Very, very important. Now, you talk about conflict management. Conflict management, here it says it's a communication process. Automatically, when you talk about communication, meaning that here people must talk, they must mention, they must say what they want to say, but in a very, very formal way. So here it says it's a communication process for changing the negative emotional states in a conflict to emotional state that allows working out a solution to the conflict. Very, very important. That's a nice definition, I must say, because in most cases, conflicts are tied to emotional states of individuals. Because you must understand that once your emotions are being tampered with, you might become emotionally attached to a point that instead of using your brain to deal with the situation, now your emotions take over, you react. That is why it's never good to deal with someone that is angry at the moment. Let them cool down, like just leave. Either it's at work or it's at home. Emotions can be, I'm using anger because anger is one of those that is associated with the conflict, because most of the time when there's a conflict, it means someone is not happy about something. And that could mean that that person might be angry, and at that moment, it might not be the right moment to address the conflict on the spot. That is why in most cases as a boss, when you see a conflict or where you see that your employees are having a conflict, instead of addressing it on the spot, let them be, call them to the office. In fact, call them one by one. After that, call them both to say that, okay, I've heard your story, I've heard your story. Now hear my story. And then you tell them what is best, and then make them forgive each other and move on. And make them not to pretend. Check on them, how are they working. In fact, if you want them to even be better, give them a very, very challenging project that they must do together, so that at the end of the day, they're able to work together and find more and more innovative ways to deal with such a project. They'll build a very, very amazing relationship that you thought wouldn't be possible after a fight or a conflict. Very, very important to understand. Now, the other concept you can read on your own. So the importance of conflict resolution in the public service is that conflict resolution is a skill. When we say it's a skill, it's something that must be learned, must be studied at all times. Because I think our character or let me just say the cracks of our character is shown when a conflict is being introduced or is being experienced. This is where you start to see the true colors of your manager or yourself, to say that, you know what, maybe this person is not right in the head, or maybe they pretend to be okay, but when they have to deal with something so complex, they become so complicated. They become a complicated human being. And some people, you don't want to see them in a conflict. It can give you wrong ideas to say, I thought you were very a professional person, but was that you speaking to so and so in that boardroom? You'll be so shocked to say that this person can really speak like this. And I remember one time I attended a conference at this place. It is in the KZN. I just forgot the name, but it was early around 2017. So what happened is, during the conference, there was a problem with the president of the conference, whereby they needed to remove him and elect a new one. So there were a lot of anger, conflicts. You know, when you see people that you thought could be your supervisors someday, and you see them fighting, and they don't fight with with fist and all this thing. No, they fight with words. You know, if you want to see the most dangerous conflict in a room, go to a place where they don't fight like your wrestlers or your boxers. No, they fight with words, and you'll be so shocked. I saw this one professor. He was busy uttering words with so much anger and that harsh tone. For the first time, I said to myself, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be like this. But it was happening in front of all of us. And even some of the students that attended the conference back then, some of them even raised their hands. They got in and they were like, we don't even recognize some of you guys. This is not what we thought we came here for. And mind you, we went to the conference to find solutions to public service problems and challenges, and to even create new studies and come up with serious work that can help the whole government to actually improve. Because when you're in public administration, there's always a way for you to find ways to, in research and conferences where you present your work, either your master's or your PhD, whereby people can actually help you as well to improve certain areas of your work. So imagine if there's such a conflict before you even start, you're not going to be motivated anymore. So those are some of the things that you don't want in your life. So that's how important it is, whereby you must learn the skill and understand the benefit of being professional all the time, and understand how to deal with interpersonal conflict. Interpersonal conflict, we're talking, in fact, when people talk about the word interpersonal, sometimes it's all about interpersonal relationship. In fact, that word comes from there. Before it becomes a conflict, it was an interpersonal relationship. So when we talk about interpersonal relationship, we're talking about relationship between people. So in the workplace, obviously, there will be relationship between people, 2, 3, or offices, and the likes. So what happens is, there's always going to be a conflict, but make sure that you know how to deal with such conflict and reconcile emotions and reach out to your colleagues and make them understand that there are available practices that can boost your well-being and productivity. Because sometimes when there's a conflict and it's unresolved, people end up losing their well-being and they become unproductive, and that's not what you want as an organization. So yeah, conflict resolution goes a long way in strengthening the bond between employees. Why is that? Because when people find solutions together, it makes them believe that nothing can come between them and actually make them lose their well-being and their productivity. Very, very important. That is why that's the last point there. I was trying to say that no one should ever feel ignored or left out. Why? Because at the end of the day, You want to make sure that you accommodate every employee within the workforce and they make you feel like you belong there. I remember reading an article about one of the professors in the field of public administration. He was saying that if you want to have a healthy working environment, make sure that there's a sense of belonging, or maybe let me just say that your employees have this sense of belonging, this sense of need or significance. In other words, make them feel like they are needed at the workplace, because some people never feel like they're needed at work. That is why they do what they do. They just feel, "Ah, you know what, even if I didn't go to work, I don't think they need me. I'm just there just to do what they tell me to do, but I don't feel like they need me at work." That's a very, very dangerous habit that someone can develop in the workplace. So once you establish that sense of belonging, you understand that, you know what, I must go to work, we're going to solve problems together, and I enjoy being in that place. There are very few people that will say that. And it's not about you loving your job more than yourself. It's more about understanding productivity, that those people at work, they make me to want to become better, to want to want to become more productive, you know. And those are some of the workplaces that you need, especially when you start learning. For example, if you go to the public service as an intern and you get there, and the only thing is that you're supposed to be taught how to use certain systems like your Logis, your PESAL for those that are in HR, and then bars and so forth. So this system must be learned, and you must be the one that, I mean, there must be someone that has a healthy relationship with you to be able to I mean, for him or for her to mentor you. So you must make sure that such a person is healthy. But if there is a conflict between them and the one that facilitate the internship programs and training and so forth, is going to end up affecting the interns, because no matter what you think, even if the conflict is not between the intern and the trainer, as long as there's someone in between where they have a conflict, you will end up not feel welcome when people are always having issues between themselves. So we can go on and on, because what we're talking about today is very practical and is very, very easy to understand. It's very, like, we relate to this. Even myself, I'm relating to what I'm saying right now. That is why I have a lot of stories that I can tell, but I'll never finish if I want to focus on them. Now, there are techniques and principles of conflict resolution. Now, here below are techniques and principles of conflict resolution. There are 4. Just remember that they are convening, consensus building, facilitation, mediation. So these you can actually find in your study guide, read more on them. The reason why I'm making this is that I want you to know them, so that even when you find them in your next assessment or exam, you know that we did cover them techniques. So there are also styles of conflict, or let me just say styles of conflict resolution. We have about competing, that's number 1, avoiding, compromise, collaborating, and accommodating. Now, here, I'm just going to touch on 2. The rest, because of time, we're not going to touch them, but I'll make sure that I explain all of them in simple terms. Now, when you talk about competing, what we're talking about here is that most of the time, most people think that they can deal with the conflict by themselves. And that's the number 1 cause for prolonged conflict between employees. You know, there's a conflict, or let me just say, let's say this involves a case of sexual harassment within the workplace, particularly when you are a guy, whereby maybe a certain female is sexually harassing you because you're a guy and it's not usual for a guy to be sexually harassed. You might say, I'm a man, I can deal with this by myself. It's not a big deal. And then you see that this lady at work is persistent, comes after you all the time, touches you, in various ways, and sometimes makes you feel uncomfortable and you can't focus. I know some people might say that, yeah, I like that. There are some men that just like being touched at work. But one thing that I must say is that it's not professional, and it sends a wrong message to those that see you as a manager or as a boss. In fact, it reduces the way people see you or take you serious, because this one and this one is touching you anyhow they want. And then as a person, you might think that you're doing well. You're not. You need to address that, because you can't do it alone. You need help. And as said, it is, most men are afraid to speak out about such cases. Even though they try to speak up, they feel like the woman will see them as if maybe they are not men enough. How do you go to people and telling them that I touch you some type of way? I mean, you've never complained about this. So that's the story of most people. They don't know how to speak up about issues like that. Number two talks about avoiding or avoidance. Sometimes people just avoid it. Don't deal with it. Don't even think about it. This one is just crazy. I know my manager. At some point they will stop. This could happen to a female as well, where you just avoid it at most cases, where be like, doesn't matter. Maybe he just liked my outfit and so forth. And then you let it continue and continue and so forth. So that's not helping. You're not helping at all. So compromise. Compromise, in most cases, you find that people compromise their values, compromise their way of confronting the problem, because they don't want to make someone feel unwelcome within the workplace. They don't want to break the relationship that they have. In fact, in most cases where there is a conflict, you find that because of friendship, you don't want to address certain conflict. You just keep quiet and say, it's okay. I don't want to compromise my relationship with my manager, and then so forth. And then collaborating is whereby you actually begin to address the conflict. You want to find out how to deal with it. Very, very important, because here's one thing that you must understand. There are certain authors that talk about the compromising approach. The collaborative approach, in which here you find that instead of understanding what's happening here, people end up saying that, you know what, let me work with my manager and find out how to address a certain conflict. In most cases, let's just use that one, sexual harassment, to say that my boss or my supervisor is sexually harassing me. How do I deal with that? Make sure that you understand, and make sure that you don't settle for less than what you need, because the collaborative approach ensures that the conflict parties meet their goals and needs by creating many mutual benefits as possible with respect and time. Why? Because at the end of the day, you must make sure that there's a perfect relationship between you and you. This is why in one of my classes, I once mentioned something that there's this guy called Max Weber. In the late 1800s, Max Weber said that there should be an impersonal relationship between employees and managers. What he was trying to say is that, guys, don't have a personal relationship with your manager, because that causes a conflict. You end up being attached to someone, and you can't collaborate with others to see where you lack something. You always want to work with someone that you know and like, and that's a problem. It might also hinder growth of employees. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with in most cases. So with accommodate, this style is the opposite of the competitive style, whereby it's more like the first one, where you want to work alone, where you don't accommodate anyone. So with accommodate, this is where relationship between the opposing parties and the negotiators is unavoidable. In other words, here you have no choice but to accommodate everyone that has a share in the conflict. In other words, the mediators tend to believe that the only way to win people is by telling them what they need or want to hear, or give them whatever they want. But it's also a problem if the other party doesn't only offer what you want, they offer what you do not want. So you accommodate them based on meeting the needs of both parties. Very, very important, because as much as it's about accommodating, make sure that you are also covered and they are also covered. It's not about the other one getting what they want and the other one getting something that they do not want. You don't want to be unhappy at work. You want to make sure that you are happy. So these are conflict resolution skills. You must have active listening skills, communication skills, and there's this tendency of transferring blame when it comes to conflict, because people don't want to take responsibility to own their own problems and actually resolve them. So they might transfer blame. So that is to say, do not transfer the blame, and remaining calm, which is something that is a very, very hard to see in most cases. People think that remaining like crazy in a situation makes them look like they know something. No, it's not a skill. In fact, it can cause you to do certain things. So when you remain calm, it's a very, very effortless skill that certain people have or have mastered. So you want to be the one that remains calm, because you know that the best man is the one that wins. So the ones that make noise, normally they don't know, they actually just making noise. So those are some of the things. And lastly, collaboration. So you want to collaborate with the people that know the situation and can advise you in certain aspects of that situation. So that's it for now. And that's the whole unit. Can you believe that? That's how short it was. Just that maybe I took long to explain some of these things, but it was very short. I think it was about 9 slides. So thank you so much, guys, for attending. I'm gonna stop sharing the slides and stop recording, and then any question?